The year was 2847, and humanity had spread across a small number of star systems. They were not a powerful species. The great alien races that ruled the galaxy looked at humans the way a grown man might look at a small child playing in the dirt. Amusing, perhaps, but not important. Not dangerous. Not worth thinking about. The hegemony of 12 controlled most of the known galaxy. These 12 elder races had built their empire over 60,000 years, and they had made it very clear that humans were welcome to their little corner of space. As long as they stayed quiet and caused no trouble, Earth's government accepted this arrangement because they had no choice. Human warships were toys compared to the massive battle cruisers of the hegemony. Lieutenant Commander Grace Sullivan had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 15 years. She was a practical woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her current assignment was boring but important. She commanded the research vessel Meridian, stationed in orbit around Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter. Her crew spent their days mapping the ocean currents that flowed beneath Europa's thick shell of ice. It was tedious work. But Grace did not complain. She had learned long ago that complaining changed nothing. On the morning that changed everything, Ensign Daniel Price called her to the sensor station. Daniel was young, barely 25, with the kind of nervous energy that made older officers tired just looking at him. But he was good at his job, and when he said something was wrong, Grace listened. "Ma'am, you need to see this," Daniel said. His voice was strange, caught somewhere between excitement and fear. Grace looked at his screen. The deep scan equipment was showing something buried beneath the ice, about 3 kilometers down. It was large, very large, and it was shaped like nothing natural. "What am I looking at?" Grace asked. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But it's artificial. Someone built this thing. And according to the dating scans, it's at least 200,000 years old." Grace felt a cold sensation spread through her chest. 200,000 years ago, humans had been living in caves, hunting with stone tools. They had not been building structures on the moons of Jupiter. "Run the scan again," she ordered. Daniel ran it 5 more times. The results were always the same. Something was down there, something that should not exist, and it was generating a faint electromagnetic pulse. Whatever it was, part of it was still working. Grace made the call to Earth Central Command. She kept her voice calm and professional, but her hands were shaking slightly as she transmitted the data. Within 72 hours, 3 more ships arrived at Europa, carrying scientists, security personnel, and enough equipment to dig through a mountain. Dr. Patricia Holloway led the excavation team. She was a small woman in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. Patricia had spent her entire life studying alien artifacts, but she had never seen anything like this. The structure was enormous. As the excavation drones cut through the ice, they revealed a vessel nearly 8 kilometers long, built from a metal that no one could identify. Strange symbols covered its hull, flowing in patterns that seemed almost like writing. "This is incredible," Patricia whispered as she studied the images on her tablet. "The architectural style doesn't match any known alien civilization. And these symbols, I've never seen anything like them. Could it be from a species we haven't encountered yet?" Grace asked. Patricia shook her head slowly. "That's not the strange part. The strange part is this." She handed Grace the tablet. The screen showed a molecular analysis of the whole metal. Woven into its structure at the atomic level were strands of human DNA. Grace stared at the screen for a long moment. "That's impossible." "Yes," Patricia agreed. "It should be impossible. But there it is. Whoever built this ship was human, or something very close to human. And they built it 200,000 years before humans were supposed to exist." The excavation continued for 3 weeks. Engineers cut through layer after layer of ice and metal, working their way toward the center of the vessel. What they found inside was even more disturbing than the ship itself. Most of the interior had been destroyed by time. Corridors had collapsed, machines had crumbled to dust, and whole sections had flooded with ice water and frozen solid. But at the very heart of the ship, protected by walls of a material harder than diamond, they found a single chamber that had survived intact. Inside the chamber was a man. He floated in the center of the room, suspended in a field of soft blue light. He looked young, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair and a face that could have belonged to anyone walking the streets of New York or London or Tokyo. He wore no clothing, just the light that held him, and according to every instrument they pointed at him, he was still alive. Grace stood at the observation window, staring at the sleeping figure. 200,000 years, she said quietly. He's been down here for 200,000 years. The stasis field is incredibly advanced, Patricia said. Far beyond anything the hegemony has. Far beyond anything anyone has. It's like he's been frozen in time, not just in ice. Can we wake him up? Patricia hesitated. Probably. The field seems to be responding to our presence. I think it wants us to wake him up. The question is whether we should. Grace thought about that. She thought about the hegemony and their arrogance, their certainty that humans were nothing special. She thought about the DNA woven into the hull of this impossible ship. Wake him up, she said. The process took several hours. Patricia and her team carefully manipulated the stasis field, slowly reducing its power, bringing the sleeping man closer to consciousness. The whole time, Grace watched through the observation window, her heart beating faster than it had in years. Finally, the blue light faded completely. The man drifted gently to the floor, his bare feet touching metal for the first time in 200 millennia. His chest rose and fell. His fingers twitched, and then his eyes opened. They were brown. Ordinary brown, the kind of eyes you might see on any human face. But there was something behind them, something old and vast and patient, like looking into a deep well that had no bottom. The man looked around the chamber, taking in the scientists and their equipment, the observation window, the faces staring at him with fear and wonder. His expression showed no surprise, no confusion. He looked like someone waking from a long nap, not someone who had slept for longer than human civilization had existed. He spoke, and his voice was soft, calm, and perfectly clear. You found me. Good. That means it's finally time. Grace pressed the intercom button. Time for what? The man smiled, and for just a moment, Grace thought she saw something else behind his ordinary human face. Something vast and bright and terrifying. Time for humanity to remember what it really is. They brought the man to the orbital station Citadel, the largest human structure in the Jupiter system. He went willingly, walking between armed guards, with the calm patience of someone who had nothing to fear. Medical teams examined him for 6 hours straight, running every test they could think of, and the results made no sense at all. His body was human. His blood, his bones, his organs were all perfectly normal. But scattered throughout his cells were structures that no one could identify. Tiny machines so small they could barely be seen even with the most powerful microscopes. These machines seemed to be doing something to his body, maintaining it, improving it, keeping it in perfect condition. He's human, Dr. Patricia Holloway reported to the assembled scientists and military officers. But he's also something more. It's like someone took a human being and upgraded every single system. His cells don't age. His immune system is perfect. Based on these readings, he could live forever. Grace Sullivan had been assigned as the man's primary liaison. She was not sure if this was an honor or a punishment, but she accepted the duty without complaint. Every day she met with him in his quarters, a comfortable room with a window looking out at the stars. He always greeted her with a small smile and offered her a seat. He called himself Nathan. Just Nathan, no family name, no title. When she asked about his past, he answered honestly, though his answers raised more questions than they solved. I was a guardian, he explained one afternoon, sitting across from Grace with his hands folded in his lap, one of 12. We were created to protect Earth during its early years, to make sure humanity would survive long enough to grow strong. Created by whom? Grace asked. Nathan's eyes grew distant, looking at something far away, perhaps far in the past. By those who came before? The first humans? They were old when the stars were young. They spread life across this galaxy and others, seeding worlds with the potential for intelligence. Earth was one of their projects, a garden where a new branch of humanity could grow. Grace struggled to process this information. You're saying humans didn't evolve on Earth? "Oh, you evolved on Earth," Nathan said. "Your bodies, your minds, everything that makes you who you are developed naturally over millions of years. But the seed was planted. The potential was placed there deliberately, long ago. Earth was always meant to give birth to a new humanity. We Guardians were left behind to protect you until you were ready." "Ready for what?" Nathan smiled. "Ready to join your older brothers and sisters among the stars? Ready to claim your inheritance." Grace returned to her quarters that night with her head spinning. She wrote her report knowing that her superiors would find it as disturbing as she did. Everything humanity thought it knew about itself was wrong. They were not alone in the universe. They never had been. But Nathan's awakening had consequences that no one on Earth could have predicted. Far away, in the heart of hegemony space, ancient systems stirred to life. These monitoring stations had been built thousands of years ago, designed to watch for a specific signal, a signal that had not been heard in 200,000 years. When Nathan opened his eyes beneath the ice of Europa, these stations detected his presence and sent an alert to the highest levels of hegemony command. High Arbiter Velkith received the message in his private chambers on the Dominion homeworld. He was old even by the standards of his long-lived species, with gray scales and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. He read the report 3 times before he fully understood what it meant. The Guardians were waking up. Velkith had access to secrets that even most hegemony leaders did not know. He knew that the elder races had not built their civilization from nothing. They had found it, discovered the ruins and relics of a species so ancient and powerful that they seemed like gods. The hegemony had spent 60,000 years learning to use this stolen technology, and they had used it to dominate the galaxy. But there had always been warnings in the old texts, references to guardians left behind to protect certain worlds. Most hegemony scholars believe these guardians were myths, stories invented to frighten children. Velkith had believed this too, till now. If the humans truly were descendants of the precursors, if they carried that ancient bloodline in their veins, then everything the hegemony had built was in danger. The younger races would no longer accept their place at the bottom of the hierarchy. The elder races would lose their claim to superiority. Everything would change. Velkith could not allow that to happen. He summoned his most trusted admirals and gave them their orders. A fleet would be assembled, the largest military force the hegemony had deployed in centuries. They would travel to the Sol system, to Earth, and they would eliminate the Guardian before he could reveal the truth. The humans would be contained. Their history would be erased. And the galaxy would continue as it always had, with the hegemony in control. Back on the Citadel, Nathan seemed to know that something was coming. He spent hours staring out the window at the stars, his expression thoughtful and sad. "They will come for me," he told Grace one evening. "The ones who rule this galaxy now, they built their power on lies, and they cannot afford to have those lies exposed." "How do you know?" Grace asked. "Because I know what they are," Nathan said. "They found the tools our ancestors left behind. They used those tools to make themselves masters of everything they could reach. But they never understood what those tools were for. They never understood that power is not the point." Sat down beside him. "Then what is the point?" Nathan turned to look at her, and his eyes were kind but infinitely old. "The point is to lift others up, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to help younger species grow into their potential, not to crush them under your boot. That is what the first humans believed. That is why they created us and the hegemony. The hegemony does the opposite. They keep the younger races weak and ignorant. They hoard knowledge and technology. They tell everyone that this is the natural order, that some species are simply meant to rule and others are meant to serve."
Oh.
Nathan shook his head. "It is a lie. All of it. And when humanity learns the truth, the hegemony will lose everything." Grace thought about her own life, about the years she had spent accepting that humans were not important, that they would never be anything more than a minor species in a galaxy controlled by others. She thought about all the people on Earth who believed the same thing, who had given up on the idea that humanity could ever be great. "Can you prove it?" she asked. "Can you prove that humans are connected to these precursors?" Nathan nodded slowly. "My ship contains archives, records of the original human civilization, star maps, showing their territory which once spanned thousands of galaxies. Blueprints for technology that would make the hegemony's most advanced weapons look like toys, and the locations of the other guardians, my brothers and sisters. Still sleeping in hidden places across the cosmos? He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with responsibility. But before any of that matters, we must survive what is coming. The hegemony will not negotiate. They will not offer peace. They will come with fire and death, and they will try to wipe humanity from existence, rather than allow you to claim your birthright. Grace felt fear then, cold and sharp. But she also felt something else, something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. "Then we'll fight," she said. "We'll fight, and we'll survive, and we'll learn the truth. All of it." Nathan smiled at her, and for the first time since his awakening, he looked truly human. "Yes," he said, "I believe you will." The hegemony fleet arrived without warning. One moment the space around Earth was empty and peaceful. The next moment, 400 warships appeared in a flash of light, their massive hulls blocking out the stars. Grace Sullivan was on the bridge of the Citadel when the alarms started screaming. She rushed to the command center, where officers were shouting and screens were flashing with data that made her stomach drop. 400 ships, said Commander Leo Grant, his face pale. Dominion battle cruisers, Kethra destroyers, Vorlon carriers. They brought everything. Grace stared at the tactical display. Each enemy ship was represented by a red dot, and there were so many red dots that they looked like a cloud of blood hanging in space. Against them, humanity had 37 combat vessels and a handful of orbital defense platforms. It was not even close to a fair fight. "Get me a line to Earth Command," Grace ordered. Admiral Susan Cole appeared on the screen moments later. She was a hard woman with iron-gray hair and a reputation for never showing fear. But today, even she looked shaken. "They're broadcasting a message," Admiral Cole said. "Putting it through now." The screen changed to show an alien face, reptilian and cold, with scales the color of old bronze and eyes like black holes. This was Admiral Zethrael, one of the hegemony's most decorated commanders. His voice was translated by computer into flat, emotionless English. "Humans of Earth, this is your only warning. You have in your possession an artifact that belongs to the hegemony. Surrender. The Guardian called Nathan to our custody immediately. If you refuse, your planet will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply." The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. "1 hour," Leo whispered. "They're giving us 1 hour to decide the fate of our entire species." Grace thought about Nathan, sitting in his quarters on the Citadel, probably watching the same transmission. She thought about what he had told her, about humanity's true history and the lies the hegemony had built their empire on. And she thought about what would happen if they handed him over, if they let fear make their choice for them. "Contact President Walsh," she said. "I need to speak with her directly." President Catherine Walsh was a tall woman with brown skin and steady eyes. She had been elected because people trusted her to stay calm in a crisis, and she had never faced a crisis like this one. But when Grace reached her, she was already in the middle of an emergency session with the Global Council. "Commander Sullivan," the president said, "I assume you have something to add to this discussion." "Ma'am, I've spent the past 3 weeks talking with Nathan. I know what he is and why the hegemony wants him. If we hand him over, they won't stop there. They'll destroy everything he knows, everything he could teach us. And they'll make sure humanity never learns the truth about where we came from." "The truth won't matter much if we're all dead," said one of the council members, his voice sharp with fear. "Respect." "Sir, we'll be dead anyway," Grace replied. "The hegemony didn't bring 400 ships just to pick up one man. They came to send a message to the entire galaxy. They came to show everyone what happens to species that step out of line. Even if we surrender Nathan, they'll still make an example of us." President Walsh was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. Then she nodded slowly. "Commander Sullivan is right," she said. "This isn't a negotiation. This is an execution. And I will not lead humanity to the slaughter like sheep." She turned to face the full council. "We will not surrender one of our own. Whatever Nathan is, Wherever he came from, he is human. And humanity does not abandon its people. The vote was close, but in the end, the council agreed. Earth would fight. The next 45 minutes were chaos. Every human ship in the solar system moved to intercept the hegemony fleet. Civilians were evacuated to underground shelters. Defense platforms charged their weapons and prepared for the worst. Battle in human history. Grace found Nathan in the observation deck of the Citadel, watching the enemy fleet through the window. He looked calm, almost peaceful, as if he was watching a sunset rather than an invasion force. They made their choice, Nathan said without turning around. I wondered if they would. The president refused to hand you over, Grace told him. We're going to fight. Nathan nodded slowly. I know. I watched the broadcast. Your president is a brave woman. So are you. We're going to lose, Grace said. It was not a question. Yes, Nathan agreed. Your ships cannot match theirs. Your weapons cannot penetrate their shields. If nothing changes, the battle will be over in minutes, and Earth will burn. He turned to face her, and his ordinary brown eyes held something vast and terrible. Unless I do what I was made to do, and what is that? Protect Earth, protect humanity, no matter the cost. Before Grace could respond, Admiral Zethral's voice came over the communication system. The hour was up. The hegemony fleet began its attack. The first wave of fire was devastating. 3 human destroyers vanished in the initial barrage, their shields overwhelmed by weapons that humanity could barely understand. Defense platforms exploded like fireworks. The Meridian Grace's old ship took a direct hit and broke apart. Sending debris spinning into the void, Grace watched her friends die. She watched years of human achievement turn to ash and rubble, and she felt something break inside her, some wall that had been holding back a flood of rage and grief. We need to evacuate, Leo said, his voice hollow. We need to get as many people off the station as possible. But Nathan was already walking toward the airlock. His steps were slow and deliberate, like a man walking to his own funeral. Nathan, wait, Grace called after him. Where are you going? He stopped at the airlock door and looked back at her. His face was still calm, but there was something else there now, something fierce and bright and ancient. I told you before, he said. I was created to protect Earth. For 200,000 years, I slept while humanity grew and struggled and reached for the stars. I slept while these parasites built their empire on stolen bones. I slept while they convinced you that you were nothing, that you would never be anything. The airlock door hissed open behind him. Beyond it was nothing but cold vacuum and the flash of distant explosions. I'm done sleeping, Nathan said. He stepped into the airlock, and the door closed behind him. Grace rushed to the window, pressing her hands against the glass, watching as the outer door opened and Nathan walked into space. For a moment, nothing happened. He drifted there, a tiny human figure against the infinite black, utterly alone and utterly vulnerable. Then he began to change. Light erupted from his body, golden and blinding, spreading outward like wings unfurling. His form stretched and grew, bones and flesh reshaping themselves into something new. The light took shape, became solid, became real. Where a man had floated moments before, there now hung a being of impossible beauty and terrible power. It was humanoid but vast, nearly a kilometer tall, made of crystal and light and something that looked almost like living fire. Its eyes burned like small suns, and its presence pressed against Grace's mind like a weight she could barely endure. This was Nathan's true form. This was what a guardian really was, and as Grace watched, he turned toward the hegemony fleet and raised one hand. The galaxy would never be the same, Admiral. Zethral had commanded warships for over 300 years. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed fleets, and brought entire species to their knees. He had never felt fear in battle. He had never needed to until now. The sensors on his flagship screamed warnings that he could not understand. Energy readings spiked so high that the instruments simply stopped working, unable to process numbers that should not exist. The tactical display showed something massive appearing near the human station. Something that registered as a single target, but radiated more power than all 400 ships in his fleet combined. "What is that thing?" demanded his second-in-command, a young officer whose scales had gone pale with terror. Zethral did not answer. He was staring at the main view screen, watching the impossible creature that had emerged from the vacuum of space. It looked almost human in shape, but it was the size of a small moon, made of light and crystal and energies that his best scientists could not have explained if they had worked for 1,000 years. Then the creature spoke. Its voice did not come through the communication system. It came from everywhere at once, resonating through the hull of every ship, vibrating in the bones of every living being in the solar system. It was not loud, but it was impossible to ignore. "I am the seventh guardian of Earth. I have slept for 200,000 years, waiting for this moment. Your hegemony rose while we dreamed, built your empire on stolen relics you barely understand. But humanity's time of weakness is ending." Zethral tried to speak, tried to give an order, but his voice would not work. His crew was frozen at their stations, staring at their screens with wide eyes and trembling hands. The Guardian raised one hand, and the universe held its breath. A wave of force rippled outward from its palm, invisible but devastating. It passed through the leading edge of the hegemony fleet like wind through leaves, and everything it touched simply ceased to exist. Ships did not explode. They did not break apart. They vanished. Their matter converted instantly into pure light. Scattered across the cosmos like dust blown from a hand, 47 warships disappeared in less than a second. Panic erupted across the hegemony fleet. Commanders screamed contradictory orders. Ships broke formation, their pilots desperate to escape the terrible light. Some tried to fire their weapons at the Guardian, but their missiles and energy beams passed through its crystalline body without effect. Like stones thrown into the ocean, the Guardian spoke again. And this time there was sorrow in its voice. "Heavy and old, I take no pleasure in this. I was created to protect, not to destroy. But you have left me no choice. You came here with murder in your hearts, prepared to burn a world full of innocent people because you were afraid. Afraid of what humanity might become. Afraid of losing your power?" It lowered its hand, and the wave of destruction stopped. The remaining ships drifted in scattered formation, their crews too shocked to do anything but stare. "This is not a threat," the Guardian continued. "This is a promise. Leave this system. Leave humanity in peace. Go back to your masters and tell them that the Guardians are waking. Tell them that our children are no longer alone. And tell them that if they ever threaten Earth again, I will not be so merciful." Admiral Zethral found his voice at last. "All ships," he croaked into his communicator. "All ships, retreat. Emergency jump to hyperspace. Now, now." The hegemony fleet fled. Ships vanished in flashes of light as their faster-than-light drives engaged, carrying them away from the Sol system as fast as physics would allow. Within minutes, the space around Earth was empty except for human vessels and the massive, glowing form of the Guardian on the Citadel. Grace Sullivan watched through the observation window, tears streaming down her face. She was not sure if she was crying from relief or fear or joy. Probably all three. The Guardian's form began to shrink, the light fading, the vast crystalline structure folding inward on itself. In moments, it was human-sized again, and then it was just Nathan, floating in space, his body limp and exhausted. "Get a rescue shuttle out there," Grace ordered. Now, they brought Nathan back to the station and rushed him to the medical bay. He was unconscious but alive, his body drained by the transformation. Dr. Patricia Holloway examined him with shaking hands. Still unable to believe what she had witnessed, "Cellular structures are depleted," she reported. "The tiny machines in his blood are working overtime, trying to restore him. He'll recover, but it will take time." Grace sat by his bed and waited. Hours passed. The crew of the Citadel worked to repair damage and account for casualties. Messages flooded in from Earth, from the colonies, from every human settlement in the solar system. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Everyone wanted to know who Nathan really was. Finally, near midnight, Nathan opened his eyes. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice rough and weak. Grace laughed, a sound that was half sob. Yeah, it worked. They're gone. Every single one of them ran away like scared animals. Nathan managed a small smile. Good. I may have overdone it a little. It's been a while since I needed to use that form. A while? You've been asleep for 200,000 years, like I said. A while. Grace shook her head. What happens now? The hegemony will be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but they'll come back. They can't just let this stand. Nathan pushed himself up on the bed, wincing at the effort. No, they can't. But they're scared now. They saw what I can do, and they know I'm not the only one. There are 11 other Guardians hidden across the galaxy, waiting to wake up. The hegemony has to decide whether fighting humanity is worth the risk of waking them all. Will they decide it's not worth it? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Some of them will. The smarter ones, the ones who understand that their empire is built on sand. But others will be too proud, too stubborn. They'll convince themselves that one Guardian was a fluke, that the others are too weak or too far away to matter. They'll try again, then we need to be ready. Yes, Nathan agreed. And you will be? Because now you know the truth. You know that humanity is not a minor species, not a cosmic accident. You are the children of gods, the heirs of a civilization that shaped this galaxy and 1,000 others. That knowledge will change everything. Grace thought about all the people on Earth who had spent their lives believing they were nothing special. She thought about the young cadets in the defense fleet, taught from their first day of training that they could never match the elder races. She thought about what it would mean for them to learn that humans had once ruled the stars. It's going to be chaos, she said, as Nathan admitted. Change always is. But it's also going to be beautiful. You'll see. Outside the window, Earth hung in the darkness, blue and green and alive. A world that had almost burned, saved by a being who had slept beneath its ice for longer than human memory reached. A world that was about to learn that its best days were not behind it. But ahead, Grace looked at Nathan, this strange, ancient, impossible man who had given humanity a second chance. Thank you, she said. Nathan shook his head. Don't thank me. I only did what I was made to do. The hard part comes next, and that's up to you. All of you. What hard part? Nathan looked out at the stars, and his eyes held 200,000 years of hope. Becoming what you were always meant to be. The news spread across the galaxy like fire and dry grass. Within days, every inhabited world had seen the recordings. The hegemony fleet arriving at Earth with 400 warships. The Guardian emerging from his human form, the impossible wave of light that erased dozens of vessels in an instant, and the greatest military force in the known galaxy, fleeing in terror. For 60,000 years, the hegemony had told the same story. The elder races were superior. The younger races were meant to serve. This was the natural order, unchangeable and eternal. But now that story had a crack in it, and through that crack, light was beginning to shine on 100 worlds. Species who had lived under hegemony rule for centuries began to ask dangerous questions. The Varathi of the Outer Rim held secret meetings in underground chambers, whispering about rebellion. The Keshtar merchants who controlled the trade routes started refusing to pay tribute to their Dominion masters. Even within the Hegemony Council itself, voices rose in dissent. High Arbiter Velkith faced the greatest crisis of his long life. His gambit to destroy humanity had failed utterly. Instead of eliminating a threat, he had exposed the weakness at the heart of everything the hegemony had built. The elder races were not supreme. Their technology was not unique. And the species they had oppressed for thousands of years were beginning to realize it. Should have destroyed them centuries ago, snarled one of Velkith's advisors. When they were still confined to their single planet before they could spread? And if we had awakened the Guardians then? Velkith replied, his voice cold. We knew the risk. The ancient texts warned us clearly. Harm the Guardian worlds and face consequences beyond imagination. We chose to ignore the warnings because we thought those worlds were weak. We were wrong. The council chamber fell silent. For the first time in 60,000 years, the masters of the galaxy had no idea what to do. On Earth, the mood was very different. The battle had cost humanity dearly. 12 ships destroyed, over 3,000 people dead, damage to orbital stations that would take years to repair. But they had one. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that should have crushed them like insects, they had one. President Catherine Walsh addressed the people of Earth in a global broadcast. Her voice was steady, her words carefully chosen. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history. We have learned that our origins are far older and stranger than we ever imagined. We have learned that we are not alone in having faced the oppression of the hegemony, and we have learned that we have the power to stand against them. She paused, looking directly into the camera. But power alone is not enough. The hegemony has ruled through fear and force for 60,000 years. If we simply replace them, if we become conquerors instead of liberators, then we will have learned nothing. We will have betrayed the legacy that Nathan has shown us. The broadcast cut to footage of Nathan, now recovered from his transformation, standing in a laboratory surrounded by scientists and engineers. He was showing them something on a holographic display, his face animated with the joy of a teacher sharing knowledge. With eager students, the archives from Nathan's ship contain information that will take us generations to fully understand, President Walsh continued. Star maps of territories spanning thousands of galaxies. Blueprints for technology that could transform our civilization. And most importantly, the locations of the other Guardians, still waiting to be awakened. But we will not use this knowledge for conquest. We will use it to help others, to lift up the species that have been crushed under the hegemony's boot, to build something better than what came before. This is the choice we make today. Not to become new masters, but to become partners in a galaxy free from tyranny. In the months that followed, human ships began venturing further than ever before. They did not carry weapons, or at least not only weapons. They carried offers of friendship, of alliance, of shared purpose. They carried the message that the old order was ending, and that a new one was being born. Dr. Patricia Holloway led the team that studied Nathan's archives. Every day brought new discoveries, new wonders, new pieces of a puzzle that was slowly revealing the true history of the galaxy. She learned that the precursors, the first humans, had seeded life across millions of worlds over billions of years. She learned that they had eventually chosen to move beyond physical existence, leaving their tools and knowledge behind for their children to find, and she learned that the hegemony had not simply found those tools by accident. They had hunted for them, searched ancient ruins and dead worlds, hoarding every scrap of precursor technology they could find, and using it to dominate everyone else. They had built their empire on theft and lies, and they had convinced the galaxy that this was the natural order of things. The truth is the most powerful weapon we have, Patricia told Grace one evening, as they reviewed the latest translations. Every species in the galaxy deserves to know what the hegemony really is. What they did? What they stole? Grace nodded slowly. And what we really are. Yes, what we really are. The hegemony tried to stop the spread of information, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with their hands. The recordings from Earth circulated through underground networks, shared from world to world, species to species. The story of the Guardian who had stood against 400 warships and made them run became a legend, a symbol of hope for everyone who had ever dreamed of freedom. Nathan spent his days teaching, sharing the knowledge of his people with anyone who wanted to learn. He was patient and kind, never growing frustrated with questions he had answered 1,000 times before. When reporters asked him what his plans were, he always gave the same answer. My job was to protect humanity until you were ready to protect yourselves. You're ready now. The rest is up to you. 1 year after the Battle of Seoul, Grace Sullivan commanded the first human expedition to the nearest Guardian resting place, a hidden vault beneath the ice of a moon in a distant star system. They found a ship almost identical to the one buried under Europa, and inside it, another figure suspended in crystal light. This Guardian was a woman, with dark skin and silver hair, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Her eyes opened when Nathan approached, and for the first time since his awakening, he smiled with pure joy. "Sister," he said, "it has been too long." Her name was Maya, and she was the third guardian of Earth. Her awakening sent another shockwave through the hegemony, another crack in the foundation of their power. But for Nathan, it was simply a reunion. Two members of a family separated for longer than stars had burned. Within 5 years, humanity had awakened 3 more guardians. The hegemony's grip on the galaxy weakened with each one, as more species found the courage to demand their freedom. Wars were fought, treaties were signed, and slowly, painfully, the old order crumbled. Grace Sullivan rose through the ranks to become admiral of the combined human and allied fleets. She never forgot the day she had watched Nathan walk into space. Never forgot the terror and wonder of seeing his true form unfold against the stars. But she also never forgot what he had told her afterward. The hard part was becoming what they were meant to be. Not conquerors, not rulers, but guardians in their own right. Protectors of the weak, teachers of the young, builders of a future that served everyone instead of just the powerful few. On the 10th anniversary of Nathan's awakening, Grace stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest station, a massive structure orbiting a world that had once been a hegemony prison colony and was now a thriving, independent nation. Beside her, Nathan looked out at the stars with ancient eyes that still held hope. "Do you think we'll make it?" Grace asked. "Do you think we'll actually build something better?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I've watched humanity for 200,000 years. I've seen you at your worst, selfish and cruel and afraid. But I've also seen you at your best, brave and kind and reaching for something greater than yourselves. The potential was always there. You just needed the chance to let it grow." He turned to face her, and he smiled. "You'll make it. I believe that with all my heart. And when you do, the galaxy will be grateful that the guardians of Earth finally woke up." Far away, in the cold darkness between stars, other guardians stirred in their long sleep. They fell,